which 53 members will be a part of the Arizona Cardinals roster going into week 1, moments away from finding out. And also, is Malcolm Butler going to be one of those 53? Alex, Clancy, Bo Brack, we are live today, Locked On Cardinals. Stick with us.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. It's only a matter of time, Bo. We're waiting for our email to get the final 53-man roster, to get the final cuts for the Arizona Cardinals, and what the hell this season is going to look like. It starts today. This is the step. These are the guys that are going into the battle with the Arizona Cardinals for 17 weeks or 18 weeks, including bye, in the 2021 season, to see if Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim can keep their jobs, if Kyler Murray can take the leap to elite status from the quarterback position. Bo, let's start with this, though. First off, we recorded our version of the Locked On's Ultimate Season preview for the NFC West yesterday with all the boys. The NFL season's about ready to begin, and nobody covers it like the Locked On Podcast Network. August 30th, starting yesterday through September 8th, Locked On's Ultimate Season preview is taking you through every team in every division with the help of Odyssey's Ross Tucker and Jason Lockenfora. Follow the Ultimate Season Preview 2021 feed on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast to tune in beginning yesterday through September 8th. Now, before we get to the final cut downs, there was some interesting news yesterday that came out of left field from Tom Pelissero, I believe, that
Mike
Garafolo, sorry, that said that Malcolm Butler is dealing with some personal issues and he may not be a part of the Arizona Cardinals or any other organization next year because he was mulling retirement. First of all, first thoughts, and second of all, do you think he's going to play, or do you think we've seen the last of Malcolm Butler in an NFL uniform?
Well, I mean, he signed a pretty lucrative one-year deal for his market this offseason. I think he's being paid handsomely, and it'd be tough for him to pretty much find anything better and to just walk away from that payday. It'd be tough for Malcolm Butler. One of the things, I see a lot of people say that the sky is falling, essentially. But, Malcolm Butler, a storyline emerged this preseason. I know we only saw 2 games, but we saw a beautiful pick from Byron Murphy. We saw Byron Murphy become more of a legitimate option on the outside for the Arizona Cardinals at the cornerback position. If Robert Alford, and big if, that's the qualifier there. It's if healthy, Robert Alford, can he start for the Arizona Cardinals? It makes it a little bit easier. Malcolm Butler's a good cornerback. Malcolm Butler offers the status quo as far as production for Patrick Peterson, but you want to see improvement from your defensive secondary. And there's higher ceilings, I think, for other players in that defensive secondary. I don't think it's the worst. I saw some cornerbacks who are already looking for jobs that were waived, cut today that could potentially fill that void. So I'm not as concerned about it as a lot of people, but it is interesting. It is interesting, personal problems or, a personal issue. Does it have to do with the organization and all? I don't think so, but it is kind of fascinating that this is coming up for Malcolm Butler, who made one of the biggest plays in State Farm history.
Yeah. There are things that are more important than football. And more times than not forget that during football season. Now, if he's got personal issues and he wants to retire, do it, dude. You've made your money and you want to walk away from the game. More power to you. You hope that everything's fine with him and his, and you can't be like, well, that's selfish. No, it's not. These guys pretty much give their life to social media, to scrutiny. Yes, they're getting paid handsomely for it, but they're putting their lives on the line. Their bodies on the line every day playing football. So obviously we're saying that with the disclaimer that if he wants to retire, do it, whatever. Now and I agree with you, because it's not, I don't think it's an institutional thing. Obviously the report came out and said it wasn't. I mean, it was for personal reasons. Now, the only reason it's more magnified is because their cornerback room is not great. And even though Byron Murphy's taken a leap and Marco Wilson has shown that he can, by and large so far, play at the NFL level, is that's who you're going to have to base this on. You're going to have to base the performance on a first-year, fourth-round pick and a guy that's need to prove himself for, the future contracts with the Cardinals or otherwise. So that's why this is even more under a magnifying glass than it probably should be, because Malcolm Butler was the lowest rated guy on Pro Football Focus during the preseason from the cornerback position for the Cardinals.
Yeah, but he was a proven commodity. I mean, you kind of know what you're going to get from him. That's the one thing in the experience, as far as he's seen everything you can see at the NFL level. But so you're kind of jockeying between what you want. You want the guy with the high upside. You want to start the guy and throw him to the flames. It didn't work out exactly well for Byron Murphy right out of the gates when he was starting opposite Tremaine Brock, who he had to kind of pull up the slack for. So and then going up, he's gonna. If there is no Malcolm Butler, that means Marco Wilson, if he does start, or if it's some variation between Byron Murphy being CB1, Robert Alford being CB2, or Murphy going inside, it's Julio Jones, AJ Brown week 1. That's tough. That's a tough assignment, and you'd like to avoid that. And he's already under contract. You want to see. Hopefully, he's in the right headspace. Do we have any idea what's going on off the field for a guy like Malcolm Butler? Is there been any any rumors or anything like that?
No, I saw somebody tweet out, and I can't remember who it was, and I don't even know if it was a verified account, but it was something interesting. I think he has family around New Orleans, so I don't know if that was a reason. And again, not reported, nothing. Like, somebody brought up that he either grew up around there or he has family around there, so that he's just speculating that might have something to do with it. But no, I haven't really heard anything. They've been very buttoned up about it.
Yeah, we've seen a couple names already released from a couple other organizations. Washington released Jimmy Moreland. You had a guy in Desmond Trufant who actually played alongside Robert Alford, and they were a decent cornerback tandem back in the day, but that was a long time ago as far as NFL years are concerned. Desmond Trufant, who I even tweeted his release, and I was like, hey, what's up? It could be an option there for the Arizona Cardinals, insinuating that. And then I looked at his numbers, and he's completely washed. Like, awful. Like, his PFF rating was 38. That's worse than Worley, who was brutal against the Cardinals last year as a member of the Dallas Cowboys. So maybe Jimmy Moreland would be an option for the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think you kick the tires on Desmond Trufant. I just don't know. I think it's just that ship has sailed. So I'm not sold on that. But there are options. I mean, I just don't think that they're going to be set in a tough spot here. A spot that they can't remedy without Malcolm Butler. It would suck. But I don't think, it makes them that much worse.
Yeah. Alex Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. We're going live today. We're still awaiting the final 53-man roster for the Arizona Cardinals. I still believe it's going to be Cliff Kingsbury screaming, keep Andy. Keep Andy. And I think that's what's, holding up the whole thing. Andy Isabella is probably going to make this roster.
I thought his fate was decided a long time ago. I don't think it was ever, unfortunately, up for debate.
That's problem number one with the organization that we cover, Bo. Alex Lindsay, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. Coming up next, we'll put a button on this Malcolm Butler situation. It kind of brings back into the fold, they could have drafted a corner at 16. That kind of wouldn't put them in this situation that they're in now. Not saying anything personal about Zaven Collins, but it just shows, again, the Cardinals cornerback room. And they signed Malcolm Butler late. Like, the fact that they even got him on the roster was interesting right before camp. Alex Nancy, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. We'll continue to roll on live here on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. Thank you to everybody who's watching. It is that time of year again, and all eyes are now turning to football as teams are back on the gridiron to start the football season. As always, BetOnline.ag is your number one spot for all pro and college football action this season. Get all the updated odds, props, and contests. They've got two monster contests. One's a $500,000 NFL mega contest, and the world's largest $200,000 NFL Survivor contest open now at betonline.ag. Go to the website or use your mobile device today to sign up and receive your 100% welcome bonus. Whoa, I almost said 50%. They bumped it up to 100% match on your first deposit at betonline.ag. Remember to use promo code Locked On. And be sure to take advantage of their opening day super promo. Make a bet on Thursday, September 9th season opener between the Super Bowl champs Bucks and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you lose, your wager will be refunded up to $25. Pretty sweet deal. That's for new customers only when signing up and using promo code NFL100. Bet Online, your online sportsbook experts. Alex Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. Thank you to everybody who was in the chat. We'll get to some of your questions later on. I might have an inside track on getting somebody in for our last segment, but we might have to get him later on in the week because, again, as we're scrolling Twitter, And checking our email, there still isn't a solid 53-man roster for the Arizona Cardinals yet, which, Bo, if they're trying to pull off a deal and Steve Keim's trying to save his ass, that'd be awesome. I just don't know if, like, so say Malcolm Butler, the information comes out yesterday, okay, from Mike Garafolo. Is Steve Keim on the phone scrambling to try and find a solid cornerback replacement or just anybody to bring in if Malcolm Butler inevitably does retire due to his personal reasons?
I mean, the first option is, hey, Malcolm, figure out what you want to do with your future.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, whatever's best for you, figure it out and let us know, because we do need to have our 53-man roster. And it's not set in stone. We know that everything's fluid as far as this is the initial 53-man roster, and what's set later today and should be right now with the Arizona Cardinals, even though they haven't done an official release on their 53-man roster, it absolutely can change, and it's going to remain fluid all the way up until kickoff a week from Sunday. But, you know, figure out what Malcolm Butler is going to do. And, yeah, I'm sure you're keeping tabs on guys like Trufant and Jimmy Moreland, and you're looking at the wide receivers. You're looking at your own wide receiver core and who maybe you could boost with. We saw a guy like Des Fitzpatrick, a guy who was a fourth-round pick for the Tennessee Titans, released today just a year ago. You see other playmakers, a guy like Pharoh Cooper, who used to be on this organization, a return man. I don't think we'll see a reunion between Pharoh Cooper, but there's just some guys that you kind of raise your eyebrow at, and that the Arizona Cardinals, because they have, you know, a lack of depth or a need in different areas, cornerback, tight end, wide receiver room. I think that the Arizona Cardinals they're doing their due diligence. And I'm not shocked that we're waiting still on their 53-man roster to be official.
This is awesome. I mean, everything you just said, I'm like, this is hopefully something, you know, will come down the pike and we'll get to see add little pieces. You mentioned the Eagles, I believe I just saw, are keeping 4 tight ends.
Yeah.
So that means Zach Ertz is going to solidify himself as the TE2. They have 4, the Cardinals have 0.
Did you see Travis Fulgham got released by
I
Philadelphia?
did, which is an interesting thing. Unfortunately, aside from the safety room and maybe the pass rush, the wide receiver room is as stocked as the Cardinals have. Now, I think Mr. Cardinals rule that, I mean, that's one of, listen, I put it Mr. in front of it.
Professor.
The safety room is one that you can the Cardinals don't have the luxury to look at rooms that are already safe and add to them at this point. You can look at that next offseason, but right now, I don't know what Steve Keim's doing, but hopefully it's something that can bolster this roster in some capacity. Because we still don't have, you know, we went live for this podcast because this is the time where you expect a quarter past the hour that we'd have some sort of information. This is going to end up being a 2.5-hour podcast because we're not going to stop it until we find out who the final cuts were. But with the cornerback room, Bo, so let's say this. Say Malcolm Butler does retire.
Mm-hmm.
Do you bring Dre Kirkpatrick back? Like, do you bring somebody that knows the defense just to keep the floor from completely cracking? Or do you say, you know what? This is a murderer's row of wide receivers that the Cardinals are going to have to play this year. We're going to try and, you know, solidify the pass rush as well as we can. So that can kind of act as a crutch for the inferior cornerback room.
Yeah, you mean the corresponding move could be bringing back guys that they just released. That could be the option, just because they're going to be familiar with Vance Joseph's system. A guy like Kirkpatrick is interesting because, yeah, he did play last year, and, you know, pretty pedestrian numbers. But, yeah, you know what you're facing in the first couple of weeks. It's going to be rough. As you mentioned, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and then you've got the guys in Minnesota coming along, and Justin Jefferson, and then, of course, Adam Thielen. They added Chris Herndon, the tight end from the Jets, that, you know, some people were kind of saying, hey, why didn't the Arizona Cardinals kind of check in on Chris Herndon, a tight end who hasn't had consistent quarterback play? You know, what's his, you know, can he get better with a more consistent signal caller? Be intriguing, but I think the ship has sailed on him being a big playmaker. It doesn't give you that big of a boost. So, the biggest question is cornerback, and that's the biggest fear because of the murderer's row that you face. I don't know what they're going to do. I think probably it doesn't do you any good to go out there and get one of these guys that's been released and is on the trash heap, because I don't think that they can contribute week one and realistically help you as far as your defensive secondary is concerned.
This is going to be a bottom 5 cornerback room if they don't add somebody. You know, I mean,
No,
I don't see.
I think that there's a huge belief in Byron Murphy. There's an absolute and that might be naive, but the organization believes in Byron Murphy
But
to
he can't
be.
play out. They want him to play inside. I mean, they're going to try and shift him outside. But he played a lot inside. The whole idea was that you were going to have two outside corners. He was going to play in the nickel. He was going to play inside slot corner. And if you move him outside, I mean, that's a completely different thing. This is going to be putting him on an island, just like Patrick Peterson did when he cheated Byron Murphy's rookie year, as you mentioned. And Byron's taken leaps, for sure has. Every game we've seen improvement, but is he a cornerback one? It's going to be trial by fire.
I really think the organization believes that, as far as getting the fan base to buy into that. I think they're going to find more that are going to be skeptical about that cornerback room than not. And I understand that. I understand that skepticism. But look, here it is right now. Like, Malcolm Butler has not officially retired. We don't know. Everything that you're going to hear is going to be complete speculation at this point. So right now, he's a member of this organization. We'll see what the official 53-man roster says, if they're going to do anything with him as far as his roster spot. But as of right now, I mean, the biggest key here is he needs to figure out what his future is. And the organization needs to kind of, hey, take your time, make the right decision for you and your family. But man, we've got a big game coming up week 1, and there are no weeks off in this 18-week marathon, in playing 17 games. So the Arizona Cardinals need to figure out that room. And before the Malcolm Butler, discussion is encouraging as Marco Wilson's play was at the cornerback spot, it was still going to be an area that we're going to be concerned about going into week 1. No doubt about it.
And the worst part for a young player is to force him into action when he's not 100%, like, into an impactful. You need to defend Julio Jones in week 1. That's going to be your first test. Starter, you're going to play 80% of the snaps. Like, it's like, that's not what you want if you can avoid it. Now, Marco's done a lot better. I mean, we had him on the podcast. The dude, he's a grinder. He loves to learn. He asks all the questions. He does all the right things. Hopefully he can be an Arizona Cardinal for a long time. But it's almost like playing a rookie quarterback week 1 when you weren't expecting to, due to injury or bad play from the starter who's going to start in front of him. It's just a completely different mindset. Besides, it goes from being, we hope that this guy can perform, and add to the cornerback room, to we need this guy to perform to keep the opposing quarterbacks from putting up 40 burgers every week. Now, obviously that's not going to be the case, but now there's even more pressure also on Chandler Jones, J.J. Watt, Isaiah Simmons when he's rushing the passer, Marcus Golden, the interior of the defensive line to hold up. It's a ripple effect. And you're right, Malcolm Butler, he's not an all-world guy anymore, but at least he'd be the anchor for that room to guide these young bucks into the future with this organization. If he's gone, there's going to be a hole there that Byron Murphy is going to have to fill immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just not ideal.
I'm a big believer in Byron Murphy. I really am. And I think that he's developing and he can play the outside. I believe him when they say that, but there is no safety net any longer. I mean, but and Malcolm Butler is going to be walking away from $3.5 million potentially. So still waiting. If you hear those chimes, those are my email, and I'm checking I'm just hitting refresh, waiting for the 53-man roster. And the Arizona Cardinals have been done this before. We've waited past the deadline for them to unveil this roster. So this is
why is there a deadline?
The league knows, but I'm sure that the team is checking in on some of these guys that have become free agents all of a sudden. I mean, they might have put in that 53, but we'll see what is in the final press release as far as who's going to be a member of this organization.
Alex Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals. We started this 10 minutes late too, or 5 minutes late. We tried to do our due diligence, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to talk a little bit about Larry Fitzgerald, because he's not going to be on the 53-man roster to start
the birthday boy
2021 season. And also, we'll take your questions. Put your questions in the chat. That's what the last segment's going to be until we figure out who the hell is going to be on the Arizona Cardinals come 2021. Alex Clancy, Bo Brack, go ahead.
If we go long, we'll just we'll create a special podcast today as soon as we get the official roster.
Yeah, for sure. Alex Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals. Thank you to everybody who's listening, following, watching on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook. We'll be right back. But first, Bo, anybody that's watching, anybody that's listened, I don't know anything about cars. And I don't. And it's true. Like, this isn't me just making our sponsor look better. RockAuto.com's got me covered for anything that I need. Like, I'm in San Diego right now. And I'm on rockauto.com trying to buy some car parts that'll be there for me when I get home. Their prices are reliably low. They're a family-owned business. They've been online for 20 years. So instead of having to go to a chain storefront to ask questions and not know where you're going and then feel awkward for not knowing what you're doing as a 37-year-old male like myself, rockauto.com, I can do it in my basketball shorts just on my computer right here. You don't get upcharged if you're not a manufacturer, which is awesome. So whether it's for your daily driver or your weekend convertible, whatever, rockauto.com's got you covered. Go to rockauto.com, right? Locked on in there. How did you hear about us box? So they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Bo, tell me about some TV.
Yeah, let me tell you, or let me just ask you if this sounds familiar. Have you got one device that lets you catch the game live and another that lets you stream your favorite shows? Are you watching sports highlights on another phone? Have you got your neighbor's best friend's login for all that great stuff? Well, let me tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get all your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings you live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes, no more trying to explain to mom and dad how you work the TV any longer. It's one-stop shop. It's one device. And the best part, there's no annual contract. Get rid of all the clutter, get all the confusion out of the way, and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. Can't hear Alex. What happened to your audio?
Oh, sweet. This is sweet. It's called the mute button on my little podcaster here. Alex, Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. Thank you to everybody who's checking out the live version we're doing today. Supposed to be for the 53-man roster special because cut time was 24 minutes ago, and we haven't heard a peep from State Farm Stadium and the Ivory Towers that Michael Bidwell sits in. Follow him at Bob Brack. Follow me at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked on AZ Cards. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll be getting bonus stuff all year round. We'll be doing a halftime show of every game through the 17 games for the Cardinals this year. So please check that out at halftime. A lot of good stuff coming. We're just getting started. And hopefully the final 53-man roster will be unveiled at some point. If not, we'll be doing a bonus podcast later this afternoon. Bo, Larry Fitzgerald, still nothing to be heard from. Are we just going to wait until something pops up with breaking news, whether he signs with another team with the Cardinals or retires officially like 6 weeks from now?
We're just going to wish him a happy birthday today. I mean, there's really not much. There's nothing newsworthy outside of he's turning 38. And you're not going to see a shocker where he's going to end up on the 53-man roster. I mean, it's just going to be something to kind of follow along with. It's going to come down to if the Arizona Cardinals are winning football games and the Arizona Cardinals can get their money right. And we'll see, if Malcolm Butler exits this team, does that free up some cash to maybe bring on a guy and get Fitz to come back and play some capacity for this Arizona Cardinals team? We'll see. I don't know yet, but we are still waiting for this 53-man roster, and that's probably like the least of our worries today here on the Locked on Cardinals podcast.
Yeah, it's just, where do the Cardinals go from here? What is their path? What is their offense going to look like? What is their defense going to look like moving forward? And we're going to find out. Are they going to keep 5 wide receivers, 6 wide receivers? What running backs are going to make the roster? Are they going to roster 4 and have Jonathan Ward and or Eno Benjamin jump up and down for the practice squad? Are they going to have 3 active running backs on the roster because of the longevity of the season? I mean, there's so many questions. Is it going to be Jordan Hicks, Isaiah Simmons, and Zaven Collins on the field a lot more than people thought was going to happen? I mean, remember when Zaven Collins was named the starter 3.5 years ago, and whenever Steve Keim did it, we're like, well, Jordan Hicks is gone. And now it doesn't make as much sense when we're seeing so many times on the field, those 3 guys on the roster. And what is Vance Joseph going to do to mask the cornerback room?
Yeah, that's going to be something to really figure out here in the next couple of days. And it's going to be the biggest question mark probably going into the game against Tennessee, because about that play action pass and the weapon they just added this offseason in Julio Jones. So it's going to be big for this organization to kind of solidify that room between now and hopefully the end of the week, because then before you know it, we're going to be kicking off the regular season, and they're going to have a position in flux that in this day and age, you can't mess around with who's going to be on the outside covering these talented wide receivers and these passing attacks. And the Arizona Cardinals need to figure that out. I don't know what's going to happen as far as this 53-man roster. It's interesting looking around the league. You've got guys like Trace McSorley getting released by the Baltimore Ravens. He kind of fits the mold of a Chris Streveler. Will they decide to carry another quarterback when you might have to carry an extra couple cornerbacks to pick up the slack if a guy like Malcolm Butler retires? It's really it does kind of just throw a wrench in things. And I really would not be shocked. This is not like inside information. This is complete, hopefully, is speculation, but I feel like it's not like irresponsible to think that the Arizona Cardinals they're working the phones and they're probably trying to figure out before they send out a press release with their 53-man roster that they don't put a guy who's not going to be on the roster in an hour on the 53-man roster. So we're just waiting for it, and we'll see what they do. Hopefully it's within addition to the tight end room or cornerback room or wide receivers.
I don't know.
Another name that was interesting was Corey Clement, the running back, former Philly running back. He was released earlier today as well. I mean, are you comfortable with the running backs?
No. No. I mean, nothing's changed. So you have the Cardinals may have never been more top heavy than they are now by rooms. It used to be, Patrick Peterson, Chandler Jones, David Johnson, and then, last year, DeAndre Hopkins, Budda Baker, Kyler Murray, Chandler Jones, even though Chandler Jones got hurt. But now it's like quarterback, wide receiver, safety, linebacker, who you can trust. Yeah. And the running back room and the cornerback room, you can't trust. You hope that you'll be able to see leaps from Chase Edmonds that we think will happen. We hope that J.J. Watt and Chandler Jones will be able to be, 80% of what they once were. We hope that the rookies are going to ball out, but the certainty level is Kyler Murray, Budda Baker, DeAndre Hopkins. That's what you are 100% certain of that they will perform. Yeah. Because we've seen it recently. And Chandler Jones, is not fair because he didn't play last year. J.J. Watt was double teamed more, I believe, than any pass rusher in the NFL last year. So his numbers obviously were lower. But that's it. That's what we're looking at. And I was just texting with somebody, and apparently this is what happens every year for the Arizona Cardinals. I thought that it was going to be a little bit, more closer to the actual deadline. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to wrap right now. We'll post this up. You'll see it everywhere.
Let's look at a couple of these real quick. I mean, we have our guys.
Let's take a couple questions. Sorry,
Jacob Hollister, intriguing prospect at the tight end position, and we've seen Hollister play in this division before.
Tanner Hudson from Tampa Bay, right, was just cut.
If you have any questions, of course, we'll take them. Obviously, Alex had kind of solicited that, and then he wanted to just shut down the show.
Well, I'm done talking to you. I mean, I'm happy to talk to these fine people watching us right now. I just don't want to hear it. If you can mute your mic, that would be fantastic. Chris Gregory, I remember. Yeah. So this was in reference to me saying the Cardinals could be a bottom 5 cornerback room. I mean, I hope so. I hope Byron Murphy takes that leap because that means that they found, a gem in the second round who was on draft day. He was looked to be going much higher than that. But because he played in the Pacific Northwest, everybody on I-95 was asleep by the time that they kicked off. I hope that that's the case. And as we mentioned, Marco Wilson and Julio Jones, that's what we're looking at week 1. And we're looking at Byron Murphy potentially going up against AJ Green or AJ Brown. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know. There's going to be so much safety help over the top, and it's just going to be pick your poison. When it comes to week 1, is it going to be Derrick Henry or is it going to be the wide receivers?
Yeah, it's like you would much rather see Wilson go up against a star like DK Metcalf, who's just he's athletic and just as athletic, and he's not going to have the whole bag of tricks. But Julio Jones is it's more concerning to see him go against a crafty veteran who's going to know all the moves and how to get open. It really does set up a very bad debut for Marco Wilson, as much as you've been encouraged by him this preseason.
Red Sea, good question. Since I keep saying the offense if the offense isn't the strength, why is Cliff Kingsbury here? Would you be mad if our offense is ranked, say, 9th and the defense is ranked 5th or 6th? If that's the case, they could go to the Super Bowl. So nobody's getting fired if they're both top 10 everything. So I'm more saying like, if the defense is what's keeping the Cardinals in games and the offense isn't as affluent and it doesn't have the highest acumen that we think that they should have at this point, that's the issue. If there's a disparity between the two, that's more what I'm talking about. If it's close like that, the Cardinals are making the playoffs.
That's like I've looked at those numbers, and those numbers stand out to me because when Jordan Hicks said that the Philadelphia Eagles team from 2017 that made the run to the Super Bowl, that's where they kind of ranked defensively and offensively. I mean, that's right. That's ballpark. Those are contender numbers right there. If your offense and your defense is ranked in those spots, that means you're having a really good season. If you're a top 10 offense and defense and you're top 5 in either one of those categories, it was a good year. So the Arizona Cardinals, yeah, they would be in a good spot. But look, Alex can say that till he's blue in the face, but I'm a believer that the defense is going to be the strength of this team. I mean, it's the pivot, man. I mean, that's what they did. That's what they attacked this offseason. They said, look, we're going to rely upon Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins to be these superhuman players and elevate this pedestrian unit, also adding Rodney Hudson in it to also solidify the offensive line. Mm-hmm. But the playmakers are pretty pedestrian outside of that. They're going to elevate that, and then this defense is going to be our bread and butter. These are going to be guys that they're going to be nightmare fuel for the opposing offenses. And it's just what it is. It's just like the air raid. It's just like Cliff Kingsbury's first year where he had to pivot on the offensive game plan, where they became kind of a run first team because of what Kyler Murray can do and the way that their just personnel sets up.
That's fine. All of that is fine. But why is Cliff Kingsbury the head coach if that's how it's going to be?
Because they made the decision after they fired Steve Wilkes and ripped that 2018 season out of the
2 years ago. This is year 3.
I know, but if you're going to make the decision to hire a guy who's under 40, that was just fired from his alma mater, that's this offensive guru, that was one of the most crazy, inexplicable rises to a head coaching position in the NFL, there has to be patience. There has to be some sort of patience. You can't just say, well, 2 years are done, and I think we figured it out. Who'd you think he was to begin with? Did you think he was going to just figure it out the next day after getting hired and putting his
No, he never should have been hired to begin with, Bo.
Well, but it's all done. That was done long ago.
That doesn't mean that he deserves to have the job now. I'm just saying, like, if the offense doesn't take a step forward this year, he should not be the head coach moving forward. That's not to say there shouldn't be an offensive-minded guy to take the job over for him. But there's a couple things. One, if they don't make the playoffs, he should be fired. If he's not fired, what the hell are we doing here? Number one, regardless, and that's barring any sort of injury or whatever. He has never been a good head coach. So I know that you're giving him time. There's still some juice left in the tank. I don't know if you're jealous of his physique or what, or the fact he doesn't have to wear socks and be cool, or his place in Paradise Valley. I don't know what it is, but he's never been a good head coach, ever. Like, not for 1 second in his career has he ever been a good head coach when the season has ended. So what makes you think that at the highest level, whether actual...
It's not what I think. It's not. I didn't make the decision. Look, trust me, I didn't make the decision on K2. I didn't. But I'm just trying to put some sort of, play devil's advocate and put some sort of rationale on why this happened. But here we are. Look, here we are. And also, I will point this out. And I'm going to point this out until we see actual results from the regular season. Is at this time last year, we were sold that Vance Joseph was in over his head as defensive coordinator for this team. And now Vance Joseph seems to be the strong point in this coaching staff. So a lot can change. A lot can change.
All right, let's get a couple more in here before we bump.
Yeah.
I have a question. Who are you more worried about not being productive on the field, Isaiah Simmons or Zaven Collins? A good question, Bo. Go ahead.
Who am I more? I'm more worried about Isaiah Simmons. I do. I think I still think that the defense is trying to figure out how to utilize him and best, capitalize on his capabilities as that Swiss Army knife. Where Zaven Collins, he knows exactly what his job is on this defense. It's to be that Mike linebacker. Sure, there's a lot that goes into playing that position, but when you have a guy that's drinking out of a fire hose like Isaiah Simmons, and trying to learn multiple positions. And you see that as far as how they're going to approach the linebacking core and in the safety core, Isaiah Simmons probably going to play a little safety as well. So, it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy the 8th overall pick once again going into a second season. But the good thing is it's either going to be sink or swim, because last year it was just 35% of the snaps he played. Now he's going to see well over that. He's going to be well over the 50% mark. He's going to probably approach 85 to 90% of the snaps. And I think you're going to see some big plays. But with that, you're going to see him take some lumps as being a young linebacker.
Yeah. I stick by Cliff Kingsbury shouldn't be the head coach if the offense is not the strength. And this season will either be great or it will be Armageddon for this organization. And Isaiah Simmons is going to have part in that. Real quick, Frank, before we get to another question, would you rather have good hair and be dumb, or be smart and be balding? You could be me or you could be him.
One of us just talked about a question that was asked, and then you just went back to an old talking point of yours. So I don't know who's just a haircut.
Well, I just stopped listening to you because it didn't make any sense whatsoever. So listen, Matthew Mason, this is a very, very interesting point here. And this is what we've talked about in perpetuity.
Read it for our podcast listeners.
I am.
Okay.
Matthew said, if our strong point is pass rush and cornerbacks are a problem, those 3-and-out phases Cliff always gets into will be more worrisome as the strength of the defense tires. Yeah, true. And that's one thing we've talked about. Cliff Kingsbury, at times, is a great play caller, and at times he puts the defense in very bad situations because they're human beings who get tired, regardless of how great the defense is. You want to be able to give them as much rest as possible, and you want to have sustained drives so you can score more points than the other team. That's one thing that, it just goes into play calling and goes into Cliff Kingsbury being head coach. I hope that things change. I hope that they figure out the elixir that, you can have more sustained drives and less 3-and-outs that last a minute and 15 seconds.
Yeah. We wish we saw some different results in the preseason, and, we're not going to overreact to preseason action, but the first team offense and what we saw from Kyler Murray was a lot of what we saw at the end of last season. And it's concerning, and until we see different, I don't think we can say anything else about this offense. But they've got to be better on third down. They've got to be better on the intermediate passing, and that's going to come down to Kyler Murray taking a jump in the third year. It's going to be key for this offense to sustain those drives and to move the chains instead of try to be this big play. Too many times, at least we're not going to see it any longer because he was released yesterday. Keyshawn Johnson on third down, Kyler Murray, step back, get under pressure, and then huck it downfield instead of maybe taking the bunny play underneath to move the change and continue the drive. So that's going to be key for that offense. Absolutely. You don't want to put the defense on the field too often or more often than you should. And look, it's going to be big. If we know that this offense can be a top 15 offense, we've seen it statistically, but we know that our eyes told us differently than the stats did. Because they had big games against Dallas. They had big games against the New York Jets. They had big games against bad defenses where they were able to kind of polish up those numbers. But they need to be more consistently good for them, and that's to help out the defense.
Paul, why don't you take this one?
The offense finishes outside the top 10, barring a Kyler injury. Fire Cliff, agree or disagree? That's pessimistic Cardinals fan. And it's gonna be interesting because what I mentioned, last year, there was a lot of empty calories as far as this offense was concerned. If they're a legitimate top 10 offense where they're consistent and they're not going to have a game when they're going to beat the Jets 38-10, or they're going to put up points on the New York Giants who are bad in that game. If they can put a consistent effort and be a legit team that's scoring 27, 28 points a game, that should be enough, and that should be right around top 10. You'll take that. But if it's a team that's feast or famine, and they're having a big game one week and they're not consistent the next week, there's a consistent issue. There's a consistency issue there. There's a coach that's lacking the ability to make adjustments, and that's going to become a problem. But if they're far outside the top 10, no doubt about it. K2 is who a lot of people think he is.
Yeah, if they're outside of the top 10 offensively or far out of it, then it's going to show on their win-loss record unless the defense is top 5. And what we see right now is that will not be you want your defense to hover around top 10. And the roster-wise, It's definitely possible. I mean, it's not going to be a huge leap. The defense has taken a jump. The defense in 2018 wasn't bad. It definitely wasn't as bad as what the record showed. I mean, they were on the field more than any other team's defense was. And I think it was by a couple minutes a game, which is really a lot. We're still kind of in a wait and see mode. They're like the biggest impact guys, Chris Trevler. And even though it seems like it's going to be lower impact, having another playmaker, I think, is very important. We talked about this on yesterday's podcast. Is it him and Tay Gowan, Andy Isabella? Are those the names? I mean, I'm assuming Tay Gowan will make the roster. If he's not necessarily ready, maybe you put him on the practice squad to start the year.
If you can
any
slide
other names?
Through. Yeah. If you can slide them through, that would be huge, but that's the big risk you take. And then even when they're on the practice squad, you can get poached by other NFL rosters, other organizations. So that's a very risky move. But we've seen they've already parted ways with 2 of their 2021 draft picks. Michael Manette was released. James Wiggins was reportedly released. So those are your 7th round picks. You start to get into your 6th round picks. What happens with Victor Dumakeji, the pass rusher? I mean, you're already starting to see Steve Keim's 2021 NFL draft deteriorate. You hope it doesn't go much beyond your 7th round pick. So we'll see. I think that those 2 guys we just mentioned, I think that they'll have a spot on this roster. Chris Trevler, I hear what you're saying about the playmaking ability, but would you rather have Chris Trevler, a 3rd option in the quarterback room, or a 7th wide receiver, or adding depth to your cornerback room, or having an extra offensive lineman?
Well, it depends. If they're signing somebody from the outside, maybe. I'd rather. I mean, if they're targeting somebody like a corner or something, at this point, you might have to part ways with them. I mean, or you just keep 3 quarterbacks. You put them on the practice squad. I mean, I don't know. It's
and I don't think it'd be that hard to sneak a guy like Chris Trevler to the practice squad. I don't know if other teams are out there coveting him. Mm-hmm. Maybe Dallas after facing him in the preseason. It's really going to take teams that he made big plays against to raise their eyebrows and go. But it's such a trend to keep two quarterbacks. I mean, you're very rarely seeing teams carry 3 quarterbacks because of the need at other positions. You should be set at quarterback because you're paying your number 1 quarterback so much money. And often you're paying a lot of money for your backup quarterback. The Arizona Cardinals aren't, getting a deal on backup quarterbacks any longer. They're actually paying Colt McCoy, okay money. I mean, a little bit more than Brett Hundley, but it's going to be, I just don't know if you have the luxury of carrying 3 guys, but we'll see. We're still waiting for the 53-man roster. We were anticipating the Arizona Cardinals unveiling their 53-man roster, but who knows? They could be working the phones. They could be waiting to make sure things are more solidified before they release that official roster. We'll definitely have it for you, no doubt about it. Once it's released.
Yeah, we'll pop back on. Alex, Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. This is officially the longest podcast Bo and I have ever done in the hundreds that we've done together. Thank you to everybody who's watched on Twitter and YouTube, who's interacted with us. Again, this is just the beginning. Come 12 days from now, it's going to get really, really fun, one way or the other. Alex, Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked on Cardinals. Be sure we will most likely be going live right when we find out the 53-man roster. Do a 5 to 10 minute hit. You'll be able to find that on Twitter and YouTube as well. We will talk to you tomorrow, if not later today.